I stood at the threshold of my old bedroom, suitcase in one hand, heart pounding in the other. The door was wide open, but nothing inside was mine anymore. The lilac walls I painted at 15 were now beige. My bookshelf was gone, my trophies replaced by cheap plastic ones I'd never seen before. My cousin Lily was lying on my bed, scrolling on her phone like she owned the place. She looked up, barely blinking.
"Oh, hey.
Aunt Cheryl said you'd probably be late." Aunt Cheryl.
My mom."
I didn't say a word. I just stood there, taking in the erasure. Every trace of me had been wiped out, like I'd never lived there, like I never mattered. No one had called to ask if it was okay. No one told me they were giving my room away. I was just replaced. Have you ever come home, only to realize it wasn't your home anymore? If you've ever been erased by your own family, comment where you're watching from. My name is Emily Carter, and for as long as I can remember, that house on Maplewood Lane was the only place I felt safe. It was a two-story colonial with white shutters and a creaky porch swing that always leaned slightly to the left. Dad promised he'd fix it every spring. He never did. But somehow, that just made it feel more like home. I was born in that house. My mom, Cheryl, went into labor in the upstairs bathroom. My dad, David, drove like a madman to the hospital, only to be told I'd already decided to make my entrance right there, between a pair of old towels and the bathroom mat. Mom used to tell that story with a mix of pride and horror, like I'd been dramatic from the start. My room, the one they gave away, was a sacred place. Painted lilac after I begged for it at age 11, with sparkly silver stars stuck to the ceiling that I placed one by one with Dad while he held the ladder. We called it the Galaxy Room. Every corner of it had a story. My first, a paper taped to the wall. The bookshelf Dad built himself when I outgrew the pink plastic one from kindergarten. The Polaroids I stuck to my mirror, me and my best friend Kayla, with frosting on our noses at my 12th birthday. The framed picture of me in my ballet recital tutu, slightly crooked, because Mom hung it in a rush before guests arrived. That room wasn't just a room.
It was my archive.
My safe space. My identity. Growing up, I wasn't the loudest one in the Carter family. That title went to my cousin Lily. Loud, dramatic, perfect hair, the kind of girl who could cry and get what she wanted within minutes. She was the daughter of my mom's sister, Aunt Karen, who was charming and manipulative in equal parts. They visited every summer from Oregon, and every year Lily stayed a little longer. Eventually, it wasn't just summer. She started spending holidays. Spring break. One year, she stayed the entire fall and did online school from our kitchen while I was slogging through AP classes in person. Still, I didn't mind much at first. I was used to being the quiet one, the observer, the helper. I got good grades, folded laundry without being asked, and never missed a curfew. I wasn't flashy. I didn't need to be. Dad used to say, you're the glue of this family. You hold everyone together and never make a mess. That was all I wanted to be enough. Some of my best memories live in that house. Sunday mornings with the smell of burnt toast and Motown playing from the old stereo. Dad making coffee in his college mug. Mom flipping through recipe books she never actually used. The warmth of it all. Every Christmas, I strung lights around my bed frame and made little cards for everyone, even if all I got from Lily was a glitter-smeared THX on a leftover gift tag. But looking back, the signs were there. Like the time I turned 16 and asked for a laptop and Mom said, "That's not in the budget right now, honey." 2 weeks later, Lily showed up with the latest MacBook Air. I remember Dad's face, tight-lipped, jaw set, but he didn't say a word. Mom just brushed it off. She's taking design classes. She needs it. Or the time I spent weeks preparing for the school play and invited everyone, only for my family to show up an hour late because Lily had a tennis match. But I buried those moments. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that family shows up in their own way. Then came college. I got into NYU. It was my dream school, early acceptance, partial scholarship, the whole thing. I was the first Carter in generations to leave our state for college. I cried in my room the night I got the acceptance letter. Dad hugged me so tight, I could barely breathe. But the day I left, no one followed me to the car, except Dad. Mom was too busy helping Lily pack for her spring art workshop in California. "She's just excited, sweetie," Dad said, brushing it off like he always did. "You know how your mom gets distracted." I nodded, but something inside me started to crack. College was lonely at first. NYU was huge, expensive, intense. I worked 2 jobs and barely kept up. But I stayed afloat. I built a life, found new people. But part of me clung to home like a safety blanket. I'd video call Dad every Sunday. Sometimes Mom would wave in the background. Sometimes not. Lily started popping into those calls too. "She's still staying there?" asked once. Dad just nodded. "She's helpful around the house." I remember the first time I came home for the holidays after my freshman year. I was so excited. I'd made a gift for everyone. A hand-painted mug for Dad with our porch swing on it, a recipe journal for Mom, and a sketch of Lily's dog for her. I walked in and my bed had been moved. Just moved to the other side of the room. But I knew. The air had shifted. There was a second desk in the room. A second laundry basket. A different shampoo in the shower. "She's just staying in here till we clear the guest room," Mom said. But the guest room stayed cluttered for 2 years. Every visit after that, it got worse. Lily's stuff took over. My posters disappeared. My books packed away. My dresser used for her clothes. I stopped visiting as often. NYU became my refuge. And yet, I held on. I believed that once I graduated, once I made it, everything would shift back. I'd get my room, my home, my place in the family. I was wrong. I graduated in the spring, top of my class in media studies, minor in nonprofit management. I had a job lined up in Seattle, and 3 weeks before I needed to move, I called Mom and told her I wanted to come stay at the house for a bit. Rest, regroup, spend time with them. She said, "Of course, honey. Your room is waiting." She lied. When I arrived at the house, Dad wasn't even home. Lily was. And my room, my sacred lilac space, was hers. The silence in the house felt heavier than ever. I stood just inside the doorway, gripping my suitcase like it was an anchor. Lily had looked at me with a mix of guilt and entitlement, as if she knew she didn't belong there, but wasn't about to give anything up either. When I asked where my things were, she blinked at me like I was being unreasonable. "Oh, I think Mom packed some of your stuff into boxes in the garage," she said, not looking up from her phone. Mom? She meant my mom. My own mother had packed away the remnants of my life without a call, a text, a warning. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked down to the garage. The boxes were there. 3 of them. Labeled Emily, miscellaneous. Miscellaneous. Like I was some random attic junk. I sat on the concrete floor and opened the top box. My NYU hoodie was crammed in next to my old dance shoes. A cracked snow globe from my first trip to Chicago sat beside a photo of me and Dad at my 8th grade science fair. The frame was broken. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but something in me had gone numb. That night, dinner was silent. Mom served chicken casserole, like everything was normal. She smiled like the woman who raised me hadn't just erased my entire existence. "So," she said cheerily, "Lily's working on a college portfolio for RSD. She's using your old desk." My old desk. The same desk Dad built with his own hands, stained to match the bookshelves he made the same summer. "Cool," I said flatly. "Should I just sleep on the couch, or?" Mom blinked, surprised.
"Oh no.
"You can take the fold-out in the guest room." "The one that's still full of boxes?" I asked. She waved it off. "We cleared a corner. You'll be fine." Lily didn't say a word. She just sipped her LaCroix and scrolled Instagram. That was the beginning of the shift I couldn't ignore anymore. Over the next few days, the signs became unavoidable. Dad seemed quieter than usual. He and I would sit out on the porch some evenings, sipping lemonade like old times, but even then, something hung heavy in the air. "I'm glad you're here," he said one night, staring off into the yard. "It's been different lately." I wanted to ask why it was different. Why my room had been turned into a glorified guest suite for someone else. Why no one had asked me. Why I felt like a visitor in the home I grew up in.
But I didn't ask.
I was afraid of the answer. Instead, I said, "Lily's still living here?" He nodded slowly. "She helps out. Your mom appreciates the company." I almost laughed. Company? As if I had been gone for years. I'd been in college, not some far-off country. I called every week. I sent cards, emails, texts. But now it felt like they'd stopped waiting for me to come back and started building a world without me. Every morning, Lily spread her things across the kitchen table like it was her personal studio. Watercolors, camera lenses, mood boards taped to the fridge. I couldn't make toast without knocking over a sketchbook. One day I asked, "Could you move some of this so I can eat?" She rolled her eyes. "It's only temporary. I have a submission due this week." Mom chimed in from the living room. "Emily, don't be difficult. She's under a lot of pressure." Difficult. That word hit me harder than I expected. When had I become difficult? I started noticing other things too. Photos on the wall had changed. The gallery wall in the hallway used to be a collage of family moments. Me at prom, me and Kayla in our Halloween costumes, Dad, and I camping. Now, half of them were replaced with Lily's artistic shots, blurry flowers, her dog dressed in human clothes, her lounging in a field at golden hour. My prom photo was gone entirely. One afternoon, I opened the fridge and saw a cheesecake with a sticky note. "Lily's, do not touch." The handwriting was my mother's. I didn't touch it, but I did stand there for 5 minutes staring at that yellow square of betrayal. On my 5th day home, I overheard a phone conversation Mom was having with Aunt Karen. "I think she's just lost. You know how Emily gets. Always sensitive. Always overthinking." She laughed. "She doesn't understand Lily needs stability. Art school's competitive, and we've already invested so much in her future." I backed away from the door before I could hear more. Invested? In her future? They helped Lily with tuition? Supplies? Did they help her move? Did they help me like that? I had clawed my way through NYU with 2 part-time jobs and an overloaded course schedule. I'd skipped meals, worked in a bakery at 5 a.m., and tutored rich kids in Manhattan for extra cash. When I asked for a loan my sophomore year to cover a shortfall, Mom said, "We just can't right now, Em. We're stretched thin." But they were investing in Lily. One afternoon, I found Dad alone in the garage, sanding a piece of wood. "What's that?" I asked. He looked up, startled. "Oh, just something Lily asked for. A side table. Like the one you never finished for me?" He paused. His eyes met mine, guilt flashing across his face like a shadow. I smiled, but it was cold. "It's okay. I'm used to being second." He didn't answer. That night, I finally confronted Mom. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us. I'd come down for water and found her scrolling Pinterest on her tablet. "Can I ask you something?" I said. She didn't look up. "Of course." "Why did you give Lily my room?" Her finger froze mid-scroll. "She needed a place, Emily. You don't live here anymore." I was gone for school. I was coming back. She sighed. "You're being dramatic." There it was again. She stood up and walked to the sink. "She's had a rough few years. You've always been the strong one. I thought you'd understand." "I don't understand," I snapped. "You packed away my life without asking me. You treat me like a guest in my own house. And now you're saying it's because I'm strong." Mom's voice was cold. "This house isn't just yours, Emily. You moved out." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I grew up. That doesn't mean I stopped being part of this family." She looked at me like I was the problem, like I was causing unnecessary drama. I left the room without another word. That night, I lay awake in the freezing guest room, half covered in storage bins, the mattress springs digging into my spine, and realized something gutting. They weren't waiting for me to come home. They didn't want me to come home. They had replaced me, not just physically, but emotionally. And no one cared enough to notice what they'd done. 2 days after the kitchen confrontation, I woke up to the sound of Lily laughing. That loud, glass-shattering kind of laugh that used to drive me crazy during holidays. But now it felt different, not just annoying.
It felt like she was mocking me.
Like she'd won. I stepped into the hallway, still groggy from another restless night in the guest room turned storage closet. I followed the laughter down the stairs, past the walls that no longer held my memories, and into the kitchen. She was sitting at the breakfast bar, drinking coffee out of my NYU mug, the one I thought I'd left in storage. I froze. Where did you get that? She looked up, confused.
Oh.
This? It was in one of the boxes. I figured you weren't using it. My voice cracked. It was mine, Lily. She tilted her head, genuinely puzzled. Okay, but it's just a cup, Emily. Just a cup. That cup had been with me through 4 years of exhaustion, loneliness, brutal winters, and early morning classes. It had been a part of the small rituals that kept me sane. And now it was in her hand, like it belonged to her. Like I had never mattered. Later that day, I decided to go for a drive. I needed air, space, anything to quiet the pressure in my chest. I took Dad's old car, the maroon Chevrolet that had ferried me to dance classes, doctor appointments, and heartbreaks for years. As I drove, I passed by our local diner, the high school, the park where I first kissed Ethan Montgomery behind the baseball bleachers. The town hadn't changed, but I had. I no longer felt like I belonged here. I ended up at the cemetery. I hadn't planned it. My hands just turned the wheel without my consent. My feet moved of their own accord. I parked beside the stone bench at the east gate and walked toward the only person who'd always understood me. My grandmother, Vivian Carter, had passed away my senior year of high school. She'd been my compass, my quiet champion. When Mom dismissed me, Grandma listened. When Dad got too busy, Grandma noticed. She'd left me letters in her cursive handwriting every year for my birthday, and the last one, given to me by her lawyer, simply said, "Don't let them decide who you are. Love you always, Gran." I stood at her grave, unsure what I was looking for. Peace? Validation? Permission? Maybe all of it. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "They've erased me, Gran. I'm standing right in front of them, and they look through me like I'm air." The wind picked up. The trees rustled like they were whispering secrets I couldn't hear. I closed my eyes, gripping the cold edges of her headstone. Then I felt it, that quiet knowing in my chest. That still, deep voice that didn't use words, only wait. I had to go back. I had to see for myself what they'd really done. I had to open my eyes fully, even if it broke me. When I got home, I headed straight to the garage again. I tore through the remaining boxes, digging for proof that I still existed in that house. An old notebook, a photo album, my high school yearbook, a memory, anything. Instead, I found something I didn't expect. A manila envelope labeled in Lily's handwriting, "House plans, spring renovation." I opened it slowly. Inside were sketches, layouts, mood boards, and printed emails. Emails between Lily and a contractor. Notes in the margins. Remove wall between Emily's old room and guest room. Open concept studio. Convert closet into art supply nook. Replace carpet with oak flooring. Cheryl approved. Cheryl,
My mom.
she approved renovations to my room. While I was still breathing. While I was still living in the house. This wasn't just giving Lily space. This was replacing me. I marched back inside, envelope in hand. Mom was in the living room, folding laundry. I dropped the papers on the coffee table like a bomb. "What is this?" She didn't even look surprised. "It's just an idea Lily had." "You're tearing down my room?" Mom exhaled, folding a towel. "Emily, it's not your room anymore. You live in Seattle now. You're starting a new life." But I didn't give it up. I didn't sign it over. It was my space, my memories, my life. "You outgrew it," she said calmly.
Coldly. No.
"You gave it away. You let her take over everything, and now you're letting her destroy the last thing I had left." Her tone hardened. "You always make everything about you." I blinked. "Because it was about me. You don't get to rewrite that." She stood up. "You're overreacting. Then why did you hide it?" I held up the envelope. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you'd act like this. Like this, like someone who just watched her mother casually hand her life over to a girl who was never supposed to stay. I didn't wait for more. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, not knowing where I was going, only that I couldn't breathe in that house any longer. I drove to Kayla's house. We hadn't talked much since college. Life had gotten busy, but she'd always been my safe harbor. When she opened the door, saw my face, and pulled me into a hug without asking a single question, I cried for the first time in years. Big, shaking sobs that left me breathless. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she said one thing I'll never forget. Emily, if someone keeps telling you you're not welcome, maybe it's time to stop asking for permission to stay. I stayed with Kayla that night.
And the next.
And while I was there, something unexpected happened. Dad called. He sounded tired. Older. I know you're upset, he said, and you have every right to be. I should have said something sooner. I waited. I tried to fight it, he said quietly. I told your mom it wasn't right, that we should have waited, at least talk to you first. But I didn't push hard enough. I'm sorry, Em. That hurt more than I expected. Not his words, but the truth of them. He had seen me disappear and said nothing. He'd watched me be replaced and turned away. But unlike Mom, he knew. And maybe that was the crack I needed to see the whole truth. The next morning, I met with a real estate lawyer. Because there was something they didn't know. My grandmother's will. When Gran passed, she didn't just leave me her letters. She left me something else, a percentage of the family home. Quietly. Legally. At the time, it hadn't seemed important. Just a technicality, the lawyer had said. A small stake passed down because I'd always been her favorite. I never mentioned it to my parents. It felt private, sacred. Like a quiet I see you from beyond the grave.
But now?
Now it was my key. My leverage. My lifeline. The lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, had a kind smile but a razor-sharp clarity in his eyes. I reviewed the deed and your grandmother's will, he said, sliding the documents toward me. Vivian Carter left you a 35% ownership share in the property. Legally, they cannot make structural changes without your signed consent. I stared at the papers. My name, the signature, the seal. Suddenly, the house I thought I'd lost wasn't just mine emotionally, it was mine legally. Can they or contest it? I asked. Reynolds shook his head. Not easily. Your grandmother was of sound mind. Everything's properly filed and notarized. A knot in my chest started to loosen. For the first time in years, I had leverage, not to punish, but to stand tall. To claim what was mine with grace. I scheduled a meeting with my parents for that Saturday. Not come by when you can. Not let's talk when things calm down.
No.
A scheduled meeting. At the house. My house. The sun was unforgiving that afternoon. It poured through the windows like truth, exposing every crack in the hardwood floor, every speck of dust on the baseboards. I sat at the kitchen table, Lily's art supplies cleared and boxed. The space reclaimed. I'd arrived early. I needed the silence. I needed the memory of what this house used to be, to remember why I was fighting for it. Mom walked in first, confused by the formal tone of my text. Dad followed, quieter than usual. Lily came last, her sunglasses still on, her phone in her hand like a shield. I thought this was just a check-in, Mom said, sitting across from me. No, I replied. This is a conversation I've owed myself for years. They exchanged looks. I slid the legal documents onto the table. What is this? Mom asked, frowning. It's proof of ownership, I said calmly. Grandma left me 35% of this house. That means any changes, renovations, reassignments of space, require my consent. Mom's lips parted, stunned. Lily scoffed. You're joking. I looked at her, steady and unflinching. Do I look like I'm joking? Dad cleared his throat. Emily, this feels extreme. We can talk about this. I've been talking, I said. For years. You just weren't listening. Mom straightened. You've always been so dramatic, Emily. Always trying to make yourself the victim. I nodded slowly, absorbing the words like poison I no longer had to swallow. You're right, I said. That's what you always told me. That I was too sensitive. That I was selfish for needing space in my own home. That I should be grateful to share a mattress with boxes, while someone else decorated my room with renovation plans. I stood and walked to the envelope I'd brought. I pulled out a single photograph, crooked and worn, but precious. It was me and Grandma sitting on the porch swing laughing. The sun had caught the silver in her hair just right. My face was scrunched up in that uncontrollable giggle only she could draw out of me. I placed it gently on the table. She saw me, I said, when no one else did. Lily sighed. So, what? You're kicking us out now? No, I said. I'm reclaiming what's mine. The next hour was tense. Mom argued.
Cried.
Said I was ungrateful. Lily called me selfish. Accused me of jealousy. Dad just sat there, staring at the grain of the wooden table like it could offer him a way out. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I stayed grounded, my voice even, my words deliberate. This house may belong to all of us, I said, but you've treated it like it only belonged to you. I let that happen. I don't anymore. Mom's voice cracked. We did what we thought was best. For who? I asked. For Lily? For your image? Or for the daughter you didn't believe in enough to wait for? She didn't answer. I laid out my terms with calm precision. 1. Lily would move out within 4 weeks. She had resources. Family elsewhere. The house was not hers. 2. No renovations could take place without written agreement. My room would be restored, not as a shrine to my past, but as a boundary you couldn't cross without permission. 3. I would retain keys, access, and final decision-making rights on any major changes until the property was legally reassigned or sold. 4. They could stay, but only if respect was mutual. No more rewriting history. No more pretending I didn't exist. Mom opened her mouth to object. I raised a hand. You can agree, or I can take it to court, but I won't be silent again. The room fell into a stunned silence. Dad finally spoke. She's not wrong. Later that evening, as I stood in my room, the lilac paint faded, the scent of turpentine still faint from Lily's brushes. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. I placed the photo of Grandma and me on the windowsill. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I hadn't burned the house down. I'd taken it back, piece by piece, word by word. Not just the property. My voice. My worth. My place. The house was quieter after that. Not peaceful, just quieter. Mom didn't speak to me for 3 days after the meeting. When she did, her voice was brittle, stretched thin between guilt and pride. She'd make small remarks. There's milk in the fridge if you want it, or Lily's packages came today, but never acknowledged what had happened. Dad, on the other hand, tried. In his own way. He lingered longer in the kitchen, poured me coffee without asking how I took it, sat on the porch swing in the evening and waited, like he used to when I was a child and too stubborn to come inside. I didn't say much, and neither did he, but the silence between us wasn't as heavy as it had once been. But Lily? Lily was a storm bottled into skin. Passive-aggressive sighs followed me from room to room. Doors slammed. Paintbrushes clattered. One afternoon, I came into the kitchen and found her throwing away a bag of my things. Books she claimed looked moldy and didn't match the aesthetic of the house. I took them out of the trash, walked upstairs, and locked the door behind me. That night, I emailed the lawyer and formally enforced the 35% clause with a written letter. A week later, Lily moved out. No big scene. No apology. She packed during the night and left the keys on the counter with a note that simply said, "Thanks for ruining everything." I stared at the note for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. I realized in that moment, I'd stopped needing Lily's approval. Stopped needing anyone's justification for my existence in that home. Still, I grieved. Grieved the family I thought I had. The one I used to draw pictures of in crayon, stick figures holding hands under a cartoon sun. Grieved my childhood bedroom, even though I'd claimed it back. Because claiming something after it's been invaded doesn't restore what was taken. It just marks it as yours again. I grieved Mom's silence the most. She didn't apologize. Not once. Not when I showed her the broken photo frame she'd thrown into a box. Not when I asked her why she never called me during finals week or checked if I needed groceries during a New York snowstorm. Not when I cried in the garage, holding a dusty box labeled miscellaneous. Friends started reaching out, people I hadn't heard from in months. Kayla invited me to brunch with her and her sister. It felt like inhaling sunlight. Jeremy, my old friend from NYU, sent me a photo of us at graduation with a message. Remember when we thought student loans were the worst betrayal in life? I laughed for 5 minutes straight. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in crumbs. Like when I found an old birthday card from Grandma hidden inside a book. Or when I took a walk through the neighborhood and saw the little girl next door waving at me, same way I used to wave to old Mr. Jenkins from that porch. Or when I opened a box in the attic and found my childhood diary. The first page read, "One day, I'll grow up and live in a castle. Not because I'm a princess, because I'll build it myself." I clutched the diary like it was a map. One Sunday, I decided to repaint the walls of my room. Not back to lilac. Something stronger.
Deeper.
Earthy. I chose a shade called sable gray. It felt grown-up, but still gentle. Like wisdom and warmth in one. As I moved the brush across the wall, I thought about all the versions of myself who had lived in that room. The scared teenager who cried after her first heartbreak. The determined student who whispered late-night affirmations before finals. The invisible daughter who kept swallowing her voice to make everyone else comfortable.
And now?
Now, a woman who had stopped asking for love in the currency of obedience. In the evenings, I'd sit by the window and journal. Not just to document what happened, but to process what it meant. I started writing things I had never dared to admit. Mom loved a version of me I never wanted to be. Being this strong one is lonely. And it's okay to stop holding the weight for everyone else. I don't need a house to belong. I belong to myself now. One night, Dad knocked on my door. He held something in his hands, a stack of letters. "I found these in your grandmother's cabinet," he said. "She wrote them for you." I think she meant to give them later. There were 5 of them, one for every year since she passed. Each one opened with, "Dear Em, I know things are hard right now." I read every letter with trembling fingers. She'd known. She'd seen the storm coming. And she had left breadcrumbs for me to follow back to myself. By the end of the month, I made a decision. I wouldn't stay in the house long term. Not out of spite, but because healing needed space. But I wouldn't leave empty-handed either. I contacted a local nonprofit that helped women transition out of unsafe family environments. I offered my share of the house to them as a temporary retreat space, somewhere quiet, warm, and safe. Mom didn't understand. Dad cried. But I felt clear. I wasn't giving the house away. I was giving meaning to what I had reclaimed. On my final night in the house, I stood alone in the center of my room. Sable gray walls. Clean bookshelves. A photo of Grandma on the desk. I whispered, "I did it, Gran. I heard you." And then I left. Keys in the lock. Door gently shut. Not as a girl cast out, but as a woman who walked away with her name intact. The day Lily moved out, the house finally exhaled. I didn't throw a party. I didn't gloat. I simply stood at the front window as she carried her last box to the Uber van, her ponytail swaying defiantly, and I felt peaceful. Not vindicated. Not victorious. Just quietly free. She didn't say goodbye. Neither did I. My mother didn't come out of her room that day. She'd been cold, distant, and brittle since our confrontation. But I didn't push anymore. I'd spent too many years begging for love that was always measured, conditional, transactional. Now, I was measuring something else, myself. I started therapy the following week. Dr. Kennedy's office was small but sunlit, with a woven rug that reminded me of the one Grandma used to keep in her den. I told her everything. The years of erasure, the room, the boxes, the photo wall, the favoritism, the silence that shaped me into someone who thought she had to earn her place in her own family. She didn't interrupt.
She didn't correct.
She just listened. When I finished, she said something that stayed with me. You were never too much. You were just never seen by the people who needed to see you most. Every session became a thread in the tapestry I was learning to reweave, this time, with myself at the center. Dad started showing up more after that. He'd knock gently on my door, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with an apology wrapped in awkward dad jokes. We didn't talk about the legal battle or Lily or Mom. Not directly. But we found each other again in small rituals. Sunday morning porch swings. Repainting the lilac walls. Not the same shade, but something warmer. Dusty rose. It was mine. One day, I asked him, "Did you know Grandma gave me part of the house?" He hesitated, then nodded. She told me before she passed. Said it was her way of protecting your voice. That night, I cried. Not because I was sad. Because someone had believed in me before I believed in myself. A few weeks later, I flew back to Seattle. Not to run, but to rebuild. I moved into a small apartment near Green Lake with wide windows and a view of the treetops. It was nothing fancy, but it felt like mine. Every mug, every frame, every throw pillow was a choice I made with intention. I reconnected with Kayla. We started meeting every Friday night for Thai takeout and long walks where we swapped podcasts and talked about therapy like two women finally learning the language of their own worth. I also joined a local nonprofit that worked with young girls from dysfunctional homes. On my first day, one of the teenage volunteers said, "You talk like someone who knows what it's like to be invisible." I smiled. "I used to be," I said. "Not anymore." Months passed. Mom and I didn't speak. Dad kept the line open. He visited once in the fall, bringing homemade cornbread and an old photo album he'd salvaged from the attic. He didn't say why. Just placed it on my kitchen counter and said, "She kept some of your photos. She just didn't know how to say she was wrong. Maybe one day I'll forgive her." But forgiveness isn't a shortcut to reunion. It's a way of freeing myself. The house on Maplewood Lane is still partly mine. I don't plan to live there, but I visit now and then. I've turned my old room into something new, a writing studio. The lilac is gone, but the spirit of who I was lingers in the edges. I keep Grandma's photo on the windowsill. Some days I sit there and write letters to my younger self. I tell her she wasn't invisible. I tell her she was brave. And I tell her, finally, lovingly, she is home. Not in the house. Not in the family. In herself. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. For holding space. For hearing the parts of my story that I was once too afraid to tell out loud. Because the truth is, it wasn't just about a room. It was never just about the lilac walls, or the broken snow globe, or the old dance shoes in a box labeled miscellaneous. It was about being seen. It was about mattering. And when your own family forgets how to see you, when they rewrite the story with you erased, it doesn't just sting. It dissolves something inside you. It makes you question your worth, your place, your voice. But I'm here to tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago. You are allowed to reclaim what was always yours. Whether it's your space, your story, your dignity, your name in the photo album, or the chair you were never invited to sit in at the table, you are allowed to take it back. Not with vengeance. Not with rage. But with truth. With clarity. With a voice that no longer shakes. I used to think family meant never rocking the boat. Never speaking up. Never questioning the roles we're assigned. But silence is not loyalty. And love should never require your disappearance. So to anyone out there who's ever been pushed out of their own home, their own identity, their own worth, you are not alone. And you don't need permission to return to yourself. If you've ever been replaced, if you've ever been erased, if your room, your place, your value was handed to someone else while you watched from the sidelines, tell me your story in the comments. Tell us. Because this community, this space right here, is for all the people who kept quiet for too long. And if you're still healing, still finding your footing, still wondering if you're allowed to feel hurt over just a room or just a memory.
Yes, you are.
You are allowed to feel all of it and still rise. Thank you for watching. If this story reminded you of your own, like this video. If you know someone who needs to hear it, send it to them. And if you're ready to reclaim your space in the world, hit subscribe. We build louder together.